Well, it's just gone 12 o'clock, so good afternoon and welcome to today's TeamSFH brief. I've got my background on today because I'm just across at Newark, and this office that I'm in is undergoing some refurbishment. I could take the camera off and show you some enormous heating pipes that have been installed, but it's just in a bit of disrepair just at the moment, and that's why I've got this light above me that looks like I've got a halo on. But anyhow, enough of that. So today I'm going to be joined by Debbie Kearsley, who's our Deputy Director of People, and Wes Burton, our Security Management Specialist, who are going to give us a bit of an update on violence and aggression. And then I've also been joined by Patrick Wilson, who's our new Chief Pharmacist, who's going to give us some thoughts on some of the developments for the pharmacy team and just his initial thoughts on Sherwood. As always, just encourage you to put some comments or questions into the Q&A button, and then hopefully we can get those answered for you. And just to start, I've got one or two updates. So obviously, while I'm across here at Newark, just to remind you, anyone who's got time, we're going to be doing the Pride March, I think, immediately after this, leaving from the main entrance at Newark. But that wasn't what I was going to say. I was going to talk about car parking, everyone's favourite topic. So we've had quite a few emails and complaints from our patients who've been unable to find car parking in the visitors' car park, those two car parks right at the front of the hospital. And it seems to be that there's a number of our colleagues who are actually parking in there and then just taking up the spaces that we would like to offer our visitors so they can make their appointment times. And it's particularly affecting those with the mobility issues, because obviously that means they have to try and park somewhere else. So just if I can ask you just to not park in those visitor car parks and park in all the other staff car parks, that'd be really good. The MediRest colleagues will go and do some regular checks and will remind you if you are being found parking in there. The longer term solution with that is the barriers will be gently replaced, and we're going to have some ANPR, do I mean that? Yes, automatic number plate recognition going in there, but that's going to take a few weeks yet. So that might be another incentive for you, because all of a sudden that might track your number plates. But just if I ask you to just think about patients and parking and just parking the staff car parks, that'd be great. Thank you. The next update is just on mandatory training, another of our favourite topics. So many of you have seen that it's now a requirement that we do Oliver McGowan mandatory training. This was following a national campaign, and any of you who've done that will be quite taken by the powerful videos in that training. So it's delivered in two parts. And what most people have been doing, they've been doing the part one, which is a 1-hour e-learning package, which we're all required to do. The second part two, this is a bit that we haven't been doing as yet, but that's just going to start to be released shortly. There are two separate categories. There's a tier 1 category, which is face-to-face training, or a tier 2 category, which is not face-to-face, but it's dependent. The tier 1 is for colleagues that have patient contact but do not directly deliver care, but tier 2 is for colleagues who provide direct clinical care. So that is starting to be rolled out. There are a limited number of places on that, so we'll start to communicate with the divisions about that, and we'll try and advise and contact members who require that second part of the Oliver McGowan training over the next few weeks or so. And then the final update I've got is around MediRest industrial action. So we've had a number of periods of industrial action, and the GMB have announced a further 5-day period of full strike action from 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 1st of August, all the way through until 05:59 or 6 o'clock on Saturday the 3rd of August. So another 5 days full walkout. We're obviously working with MediRest on the contingency plans, as we've done before, to try and minimise the disruption for our patients and colleagues during this period. And we'll continue to update you with all of those plans as they develop. There is likely to be a picket line. We've had 2 substantial picket lines during the course of the previous industrial action. So we'll just update you, as I say, with that. So that's all of my updates that I've got for you. Just to remind you to put questions into the chat, into the Q&A session, and then we can hopefully get our colleagues to answer those. I'm going to bring in Debbie and Wes. I think Debbie's going to go first and just show us a few slides, and then Wes will carry on. Debbie, over to you.
Thanks, Dave, and good afternoon to everybody. I hope everybody is well on this sunny day. Hopefully you can see. Yes, thank you. So thank you for Wes and I to come along today to talk to you about violence and aggression, and in particular our violence and aggression improvement plan that we've launched for 24-25. You may have seen some communications around the organisation and posters regarding our campaign entitled Expect Respect and Not Abuse. So what we recognise is feedback from our NHS staff survey, but also through the DATIX reports, our pulse surveys, and via our various feedback methods, is we recognise that our people are exposed to episodes of violence, abuse and aggression from our patients, service users, and on occasions their relatives in the course of their role. And while we acknowledge that this is not acceptable, we do recognise that some of our patients don't always have the capacity to make decisions in terms of the behaviours that they display. Nevertheless, we recognise that anybody who is experiencing violence, aggression and abuse from patients, service users and relatives, the impact is still the same, whether that's physical injuries or emotional and mental impact. What we want to do as an organisation is commit to you to support to, one, reduce and prevent violence, aggression, abuse within the workplace. But if there are episodes of violence and aggression, abuse, is to support our people who experience those circumstances. So there is a national campaign as well, which identifies as a NHS that we should have an improvement plan or violence reduction strategy. But what we wanted to do is create an improvement plan that was meaningful and based on feedback from colleagues and taking forward themes that have come from this staff survey. And our priorities, we've got 6 that we're taking forward. 1, we want to build a leadership culture, and this links to our overall people strategy and our overall trust strategy. We want to support our leaders to display leadership values that are kind and compassionate, where our people, you, are valued and your voices are heard. We want to promote active reporting. So we recognise that there are incidents of violence, aggression, and abuse within the organisation that aren't reported. What we want is individuals to report episodes of violence and aggression and abuse, because through that we can identify areas where we can do some focus work, whether that's training, whether that's wellbeing, OD, to come in and support teams and individuals to look to reduce episodes of violence and aggression and support individuals who have been on the receiving end of those behaviours. We want to provide end-to-end support. As I've said, we do not underestimate the impact that it has on individuals who experience violence, aggression and abuse, and we want to ensure that our colleagues are supported. And we have our wellbeing offers, but we are creating support packs to be handed out if there are incidents, so individuals know where they can get immediate support from, but also support in the aftermath of any incidents. We want to improve our training resources and empower our people to de-escalate situations, to try and prevent and reduce those episodes of violence, aggression and abuse. And Wes will come on to that. We want to amplify our communication, so be open and transparent with you, our people, about violence and aggression within Sherwood. We know it happens, and we want to share with you the actions that are being taken and the action plans that we are putting in place to support you, our people, but also to reduce those episodes of violence and aggression. And then we want to work with our system partners, but not also our health colleagues, but our police and other system partners, to link into those wider agencies and to reduce episodes of violence and aggression. And Wes and I are now part of a Midlands-wide violence and aggression group, which includes the police, social services, etc. So we are feeding into those forums, but also learning and bringing that learning back into the organisation. So, as I say, you may have seen some campaigns. We know communication is really important, and we have created a communication campaign. So you'll have seen this on the intranet, on the internet, and also posters throughout the organisation. These posters do have pictures of our staff who have experienced potential episodes of violence and aggression. We have created a support leaflet, which we will be delivering to all of the clinical areas and other areas, so individuals know where they can get support from. And we've also created a support card, which we are working with our security teams. So if there are episodes of violence and aggression, you will be given one of the cards, so you know where you can get support from immediately and at that time. There's further information that's available. So we've got a dedicated staff abuse intranet site, and we've got an external staff abuse website as well. So there's a wealth of information on those intranet and websites that individuals can access information. So in terms of the support available, I won't go through all of these, but not just wellbeing support is there for individuals, but also we have numerous teams within the organisation that can support with episodes of violence and aggression, or can support with training and support if you have any patients or relatives or service users that you feel you need support from to de-escalate situations or need support, such as our drug and alcohol dependency, our admiral nurse for dementia, our safeguarding colleagues, our dementia team. So this is a true multi-disciplinary approach to looking to reduce and prevent violence and aggression within the organisation, but also to support our colleagues. And we have support, our wellbeing support, which is well embedded within the organisation through our BIVUP, our occupational health, our clinical psychology, for example. And all again, as I say, this information is on the Trust intranet and website. So I'm going to pass over to Wes now, who's going to go through the updates in terms of managing challenging behaviours.
Afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for having me. Today, we're just going to briefly echo what Debbie's reiterated within our new plan and our action, and training is one of the fundamental key elements to that. We have worked alongside Icon Training, who's we've formed a partnership with in delivering our managing challenging behaviour training, and we've also listened to you. So we've done various walk rounds, we've done department briefs, and we've took what you've said from the staff brief and from our staff survey, and we've been able to fundamentally review and look at what's best suited. Initially, when we started that partnership journey with Icon, this training was only open to selected areas within the organisation, and fundamentally there was ways that we needed to develop, and I think we've clearly understood and we've heard what our colleagues are saying, and that is that everyone needs to have that same level of training, and that's something that I echo. I understand that. So what we've took as an organisation is we're bringing back face-to-face conflict resolution training, which will involve de-escalation and the de-escalation skills and breakaway skills. So if you're getting into those slight incidents where patients may grab you by the wrist or your clothing, what minor hold can release those, and we can escalate that. So that is getting rolled out within the few coming months, and that's something that's been very welcomed throughout the organisation. And then to top that up, we've managed to take a review of the actual training itself. So if we just look at our next slide, we've been able to look at within ICON what that element of de-escalation involves, how that looks to individuals, because obviously we all interpret violence and aggression very, very differently. A lot of our incidents, when we've looked back and we've done that research, it does come with that patient's clinical condition, and it's how we then understand we've still got that care to deliver, but we also may have different approaches that we need to use. And the biggest emphasis is all that we've heard from staff is the de-escalation side of it. And since obviously we had the pandemic, everything turned back to e-learning, whereas we want to reintroduce that face-to-face training to give all colleagues across SFH the same level of training and the same level of response. And the other good success story that we've got is the managing challenge behaviours and restrictive practice element will be open to all staff groups. So staff from every department will be able to access that training. It won't be isolated to selected areas. The next part that I want to briefly talk about is our incident reporting, and this is where we've done tremendous steps in the organisation over the last few years. We've been able to ensure that our staff understand what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and that colleagues are able to report that, and we've streamlined even further how we can narrow that down, particularly when we're looking at violence and aggression and how we interpret that data. We still need to do work on that, and it will always be work that's in the pipeline to do. But all I would emphasize to colleagues is that we do get that initial DATEX form. It does take time, but that gives us our data that allows us to show the trends and the themes within the departments that you work in and across the whole organisation. And we then can compare those statistics with our colleagues in other trusts around the country, and we can look where we are on the statistic level, and if we've got pockets of incidents just within our organisation, or if those trends are actually national trends. Initially on the DATEX, everyone will get a response from that DATEX system, so not just from your line management team, but from myself or a member of our team. If it's that you've experienced violence and aggression, we will touch base with you to make sure you're okay. And if you do need any further support, we're there, and we're here to support you. We've worked very, very closely with our colleagues in Nottinghamshire Police, and as Debbie said earlier, we have signed up to the Nottinghamshire Violence Reduction Programme, where colleagues from the community and wider healthcare organisations, including our social care and council colleagues, come together to look at those trends and themes within different towns, villages and cities throughout the country to see if there's things we can narrow down. And one prime example is, at the minute, there's tremendous amount of work going off in the community regarding our younger people and knife crime. That's one big campaign that's going through at the minute. So this is where we will, as an organisation, be able to get involved and to look at how we can interact in that wider community that we play a vulnerable part in. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Wes. Just looking at the Q&As, we haven't got many questions in the Q&As, most of which we've already answered. So I'll just start with one or two. I think, Wes, you answered my first question was, and I think Debbie said, ideally, we want to call this out and not tolerate this. And so my question was going to be how to report it. But if I've got this right, there are three things. One, to your line manager, secondary via DATEX, and thirdly, there's the option to use for police via 101, if I've got that right. So I'll ask a couple of questions while people just think what they might want to ask you. So Debbie, the strapline there, expect respect and not abuse. So to expect that respect, we've got to communicate that, haven't we, to our wider population. So I was just wondering how we involved all our partners in the system and this, and try and get that out to our communities and our citizens out there.
Yeah, thanks. Some really good questions. So what I would say is we're on a journey here. So this is the first part. This is the first part in terms of this action plan, the first time that we've had this. We have shared our improvement plan with our system colleagues, so and with the groups that we're working with, and this has been developed multidisciplinary with colleagues feeding into this. The next phase of this action plan will be around an external communication campaign about what is and is not acceptable within our organisation in terms of violence and aggression and abuse, and actually what the consequences of that will be in terms of if somebody comes into our ED department or is on one of our wards, whether that's a patient, service user or relative, and they are abusive or aggressive or violent towards our people, then not just in terms of managing that, what Wes has said, but in terms of what can we do in terms of at what point do we say we're not prepared to accept this and we're not going to treat you anymore. Now, clearly that's a balance in terms of some of our patients don't have capacity, so that will form part of all of that. And also if patients are in a life-threatening condition, but we will be creating that campaign and we hope to launch that within the next couple of months. And if anybody wants to feed into that, then please contact myself or Wes, and we'd be really welcome for you to feed into that. The other point is as well is we know this is happening, and I think this is the first time we've been having these conversations. We are going to be preparing a board video to come to our board to highlight what we're doing, but also to highlight that this does occur within our organisation. So again, if anybody wants to be involved with that, then please contact Wes or myself.
Okay, thanks. And it's going to be a real, as you say, a real campaign, isn't it? We've got to get that message out. We've got to just ensure that people understand we have a zero tolerance to this. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the what do we do in a minute, but just Wes, so if I got this right, we're rerunning the face-to-face conflict training aspects, so that sounds good, and key to that is around de-escalation, which is the what people ask for actually. How do they take the heat out of that situation? I guess the question I just wonder is, so they do all that and that's not working. So when do they call security, and when do they call the police?
I think fundamentally, a lot of the time in the instance that I've been to myself and supporting clinical colleagues and our security colleagues, call them earlier. And sometimes prevention's the key element to this. I think fundamentally, a lot of the time we often treat the patient, which is the fundamental need, but we don't look at that bigger picture. So I think once we've started those initial talks, and if that's come from a nurse-led or a clinician-led background and that's escalated, what we found initially within the teams that we work in is a different uniform, a different person can absolutely be key to just that other interaction. And sometimes, again, that's key to that de-escalation. If then that patient or our visitors still haven't managed, and we've not managed to create that circle and come to some sort of compromise, we have got our other services, and we use the legislation that's been imposed a lot more. So if we did call the police, they're using the Assault on Emergency Workers Act, for argument's sake. There's an actual piece of legislation now that we can use, and we will put forward to the CPS to get successful sanctions or prosecutions against individuals for that. And also, with the introduction of body cams, we've seen a significant amount, although we still experience it, we've seen a significant reduction in behaviours, because once people know that they're being filmed, it does have a different effect on that. So the body cams have been a successful rollout. We are looking at what role they play within our clinical field. So that's something that we are looking at for the future, and if that is a role that it plays in within Sherwood Forest. Working with Notts Police, looking at those sanctions, the body cams we've had, lots more evidential to use for individuals, and we have had successful sanctions placed on. So sometimes it might be that we don't always get a sanction that people are imprisoned, but we have got other ways that those individuals will be held to account for their actions, and there's community orders and a vast array of other things that we do use. And then once we look at, you mentioned earlier, looking at system wide, once we then elaborate that into our system-wide approach with our RCB colleagues and colleagues from other organisations, known repeat patients and known repeat offenders that come to us, we're able to build a bigger picture and get more success rate within that. So we work very closely, particularly with EMAS, on their known regular patients that do unfortunately demonstrate challenging behaviours to them.
That's really helpful. So I was going to ask about body cams and the impact. So I think you've answered that. And I know you and I and the rest of the exec team are working on looking at the security provision across the different sites that we've got now, particularly as we've increased the activity at Newark and without doubt at the community hospital as the community diagnostic centre comes on. So we're dealing with that. But in terms of those repeat offenders, so they're yellow cards and red cards. So what are they, and how do we use them?
Yeah, so before we, within the organisation, we used to have, all of us within the NHS followed our guidance and recommendations from a service called NHS Protect. Going a few years back now, that service dissolved. So organisations were then left on how they progressed that. So although they're following the standards that were in place, that service has been took over by NHS England, and there's been a full revamp and different standards delivered to us. So as an organisation, we have a set of security standards, and we've now got the new violence reduction standards that we will be monitored on and audited on in our RAG rating against those different themes and trends. And particularly when we start to look at those standards, that then helps us to broaden our further patterns that we need. So particularly when we look at staff training, there's a lot more training that we could do within our clinical colleagues and format to understand patient care, and trauma-informed care is a key element that we want to look at within the future and roll that out, because from our statistics, 90% of our incidents regarding violence and aggression has a clinical spin. So it's not sometimes a case of simplicity of getting someone ejected from our sites. A lot of the time we will have to manage those incidents of challenging behaviours, and I think that fundamentally comes back to the grassroots of it. It looks down to whether the red and yellow card policy is fit for practice in today's current climate. And I think that's something as an organisation in the next few months, again, as part of our improvement plan, we're going to look at if that's the right thing. Often people use a red and yellow card system within that sense of, does that work? But I think fundamentally it's a very difficult decision to say we're not going to actually treat someone, because that then comes with other wider implications. Using the Emergency Workers and Assault Act, what we're able to do under the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act, and I don't want to bamboozle colleagues with pieces of legislation, but anyone on an NHS premise that is causing a nuisance, a disturbance, and they don't actually have to be here, they are committing an offence under that act. So we have been able to use those powers and get, again, successful convictions and sanctions against individuals. So those powers are very useful when it's a member of the public that actually does not need treatment and is just causing a nuisance on the premise and refusing to move. That is a criminal offence in itself, and we have successfully used those powers at Sherwood.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Wes. And Debbie, just there's a one that's come in, a question that's come in, which is sounds a good idea to me. It says, can we add the expect respect, not abuse logo to our branding to perhaps letters, emails, and do that?
Sounds like a brilliant idea, and we'll take it through the V&A group. Yeah, absolutely.
Take that one, I think. Thank you all for that. Okay, right, I'm going to just move us on. So I've got Patrick. Patrick, welcome to Sherwood.
Thanks, Dave. It's great to be here.
So I'm just going to hand over to you. You're going to give us a bit of a background on you and what's brought you here.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm really excited to be here. This is now day 12 of my time at Sherwood, and I've had a fantastic time so far. I've really enjoyed the welcome I've had from within the pharmacy department, from the CSTO division, and from the people development support that I've had during my induction as well. It's all been really good. Really enjoyed myself, and it's great to see the pride people have coming to work here in the organisation. So I promised to give a little bit of information about myself. So I've been a pharmacist for about 25 years. I've spent most of my time in the East Midlands, moving slowly up the M1, 7.5 years in Leicester, 8.5, 9 years in Nottingham at NUH, and then I've just started here. And my background, my interest is primarily around clinical pharmacy, so the ward service provision, pharmacist prescribing, pharmacy technicians in clinical areas, things like that. So I'm really pleased to have come into the department here. I've met some, but not all of my team yet, and I'm really enjoying getting around and seeing them all and seeing what they do. I think we've got a really good team of people working in the pharmacy department here. I'd like to thank the sort of pharmacy leadership team and Mark Clymer in particular, who've led the department over the last few months until I've started, and I think they've done a really good job of not just keeping things going, but pushing forward various things in the time in between the sort of two substantive chief pharmacists. So for people that don't know much about pharmacy, we've got a team of about 150 people. We've got a variety of different roles. We've got 2 registered professions in pharmacists and pharmacy technicians who are both independent autonomous professional groups. And then we've got a number of staff who are unregistered professionals, so pharmacy assistants, and then other staff, admin and clerical staff, IT, scientists, and so on that work in our quality control department. So there's quite a diversity of staff within our team that all contribute towards our part of patient care, which is really what we are all focused on. So I've come in and I've had a look at what I've seen so far, and I think we've got some really excellent parts to our service and our team, and things that we can develop and grow on in other parts of our team. And I think my ethos, my reason for being here is I want the pharmacy department and the trust to deliver excellent care in terms of medication. That's where we come in. So we should be there to support all of our clinical colleagues in terms of safe, effective, cost-effective use of medicines, and providing the best care for our patients. And if there's areas we're not doing that as best we could, then we want to know about it. So I'm very open, very happy to talk to anybody if there's anyone in the organisation that thinks there's perhaps somewhere we could be doing things better. Equally, if the things you think we're doing really well, it'd be really nice to hear that as well. So it's exciting times in the pharmacy department and the wider pharmacy world. As lots of you know from the communications that come around the trust, we've got a brand new shiny robot in the dispensary here at Kingsmill Hospital, which has been named Dorothy, which is, as the name was chosen before my arrival, and it's probably coincidence that it's the same as my mother-in-law's name. The robot stores 20 to 22,000 items, so it's most of the pharmacy stock will live in that robot, and it will whiz around and pull it out for us when we need it. There are some things that don't fit very nicely in there, and we can't store in there, and some things that are heavy and shouldn't be going around on conveyor belts above head height. It's an Italian robot, and I'm told it's the 3rd one of its type in the UK so far. So we're very happy to have this, and it replaces the previous automation system that we had, which was beyond the end of its sort of working life and was beginning to cause problems. So we're still making friends with the robot and forming a mutual trusting relationship with it, so that we know how to get the most out of it, and it supports our system the best way it can. So we've got a few little teething problems that we're still working through now, but I think the team are getting familiar with it. The company are back on site this week to just do some more troubleshooting of little problems we've had. Outside of Sherwood Forest, there's some changes nationally that are really exciting for pharmacy. So the undergraduate training of pharmacists is changing. So as of 2026, people that qualify as pharmacists will come out with an independent prescribing qualification at the point of qualification as a pharmacist, which is a big change for us. So we as an organisation need to adapt to that and make sure we put in place the right support for those people when they qualify as pharmacists. And that will mean that they'll need support in the clinical areas in which they work to use that qualification in practice in a safe and effective way. It also means that the expectations of people qualifying as pharmacists will change. We need to make sure our roles reflect that, and we remain an exciting and interesting place for people to work. Our pharmacy technicians, there's been a recent legislative change that allows them to administer and supply medicines under PGDs, patient group directives, which is a new and exciting thing for that group of staff as well. And the other role that we play is looking outwards across the ICS and wider about how we can form relationships with other organisations, and that's something I want to really bring to the fore and make sure we make the most of the relationships we have with the higher education institutes and other care providers in the locality. So I'm just going to sum up by saying again, thank you to the people that have looked after me during my induction, and I'm really excited and happy to be here.
Oh, that's great. That's really, really good. Welcome to Sherwood. So just on your bit about the changing in the pharmacy roles there, if anyone wants to put some questions in. So Debbie and I are both very keen on, we have a program running we call Step Into Health, where we run it twice, 3 times a year, where we have a big sort of jamboree and encourage people to pick up NHS careers, recognising there are 350 careers, but we always get a really good pharmacy stand there, and there's always a lot of interest around that. And that's not just about pharmacists; that's around technicians, as you say, and the whole gambit of all of that. So that will be good to see progress. Now, Dorothy, I hear that she's been shortened to Dotbot. Is that true?
I believe that is true, yes, although that's not a Chief Pharmacist decision.
Not sure that's happened. And your bit there about the outward facing of pharmacy, that's something about moving pharmacy more out into the limelight, which I think is a really strong commitment for us, and a really good thing to get our teams, if you like, out into the patient facing areas, which is where they do their best work, and to encourage that. So recognising you've got an enormous amount of drugs there in pharmacy, we spend £30 million on drugs. What are the best drugs then, Patrick? You can tell us.
The best drugs are the ones that the patient takes and that have a positive effect on their health and well-being. And that first bit's really important, because we know we talk about medicines wastage, we talk about that from a financial perspective, but we know it's a challenge for people to take their medicines. And one of our roles, not just exclusive to pharmacy, of course, is to make sure people get the most out of their medicines. And sometimes that means supporting them in how to take them, understanding why people take their medicines, why they don't take them, understanding the burden we place upon somebody when we prescribe them a medicine. So there's some really important things that you can only gain by actually, for us, that communication with the patient and speaking to them and understanding them and what they need. I've dodged the question quite nicely there.
Yes, I know that. Clearly professional leader. And one last one from me then. So EPMA, so electronic prescribing and administration, good thing or a bad thing?
Good thing.
Good thing.
Easy to answer. I mean, I think I've not spent a lot of time out in the clinical areas yet in the trust, but having come from a trust that also uses Nerve Centre, I think, particularly from a prescribing perspective, I think it works very well. I've used it. I've prescribed in the system, admittedly in a different organisation. I think we can set it up. We have set it up in such a way that it supports the safe and effective use of medicines, which is what it should do. It removes certain types of error. It increases the risk of other types of error. Where you start typing one drug and don't notice it's brought up not the one you were intending, that kind of thing. But there's an ongoing learning process that we monitor medication errors through Datix and so on, and we actively are looking for any incidents relating to electronic prescribing that we can use to manage out the system.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, and we're starting to roll out, so we've got 80% of the trust or so, the inpatient areas covered. We're starting to roll out to those other ones. I think we've just gone out in the last 2 or 3 weeks into maternity, and then we've got plans for paediatrics and then for critical care. So then Matt should do it. We're still thinking about outpatients and what we're going to do there. But again, that's a slightly harder question to get into. Perfect. Okay. And if I've got this right, you're very happy to get people's ideas for innovation improvements and to give you some feedback. So we might get you to just put your email into the into the Q&A.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks.
I can't see any other questions that have come in. Everyone's been very quiet on this Tuesday. So I'll just probably start to bring that to a close, really. It's obviously really busy in terms of clinical activity. Despite it being July, we're seeing very significant attendance into our emergency pathways, which is causing us pressure. The summer weather is obviously here. Even at Newark, it is sunny today. And some key messages there about helping us to improve our pharmacy services, but also using our pharmacy services. I don't think I comment on .bot, but then the bits about the aggression is to call it out, not tolerate it, zero tolerance, and hopefully to educate our citizens with all of that. Brilliant. Thank you all so much. Patrick, thank you. Wes, thank you. Debbie, thank you. And of course, Jess, who's working tirelessly behind the scenes, thank you. And we'll draw it to a close there. Thanks, everyone.